Hello everyone. Tonight we're going to be working on Module 7, Java Programming, CS187, New Mexico State University. And we're going to be going over a couple of new cool commands that continue to give you power over programming. And we've been working with the logic statements, the Boolean, and then incorporating those into our programs. We made a dice game. We made a random number generator using if, for, do, while loops, switch case, in order to start to give the program control so that it works without us directly controlling it. And so we're going to do a little bit more of that today. Want to work on another if statement, and we're just going to mostly do refresher, not as much dealing with Module 7. Part of Module 7 is more conceptual, less programming, and so we'll go over that as we need it. But right now, let's go ahead and get Eclipse fired up, and we are going to create a new package. Okay, and a new class, and we're just going to call this class review. All right, so we need to go ahead and public static void main. And we're going to be going over a couple of new concepts today, but they will be fairly small and pretty easy to use. All right, there's Alex. Don't forget, if you have questions as we're going along, you can either pipe in if you choose, or go ahead and shoot it into the message box, and I will grab it when I get a chance. All right, so let's consider what we've learned so far. So we've learned about as far as our classes being involved, we have learned about two new ones that we've been using quite a bit, and that's the scanner as well as random. And so, oops, I didn't want to do that. And so what we want to do is look at how we can use those even more effectively. So we're going to go ahead and switch to our screen share. And everybody should be looking at my Eclipse. And let's go ahead and write some code. I had to readjust. This monitor size is just so nice and big that everything fits too well. So let's go ahead and look at random. Okay, so random, remember, capital random, you can then call the object whatever you want, but I like random, works for me, new, random, and don't forget the empty parentheses. Now notice again that it turned red, and that is to let us know we need to import the java.util.random, and so now that it's imported, we're ready to go. So let's look at what this does. So let's go ahead and do a print statement real quick. And let's just say your number is, and then we want to go ahead and, yes, what is that big fancy word? Concatenate our random number into a string. So we'll save that. Let's go ahead and run it. And notice it says your number is Java util random at 6D, etc., etc. Notice that's an address. And when you see this, this should remind you that you have not created a seed, if you will, a integer value for your random. So if you do this exactly as we have, it will run, but this is a memory location. And so it's not actually giving you anything useful. So what we need to do is go ahead and initialize a variable, and we'll just call this number, and that is equal to our random dot. Now, what are we getting from our random number? We're getting our next integer, right? That's what we're looking for. Now we can go ahead and put number down here in our string, if I can spell it right, and run it. And notice now we have a value. And this value can be quite extreme. In most instances, unless you're writing, say, a cryptography program or something like that, you're going to want a positive integer in a certain range. And the way that we do that is first we define a 0 to something range. So let's say we want a 0 to 15,000. Once again, we can save that. And now our number is going to be in the range of 0 to 15,000 minus 1, because we have 15,000 numbers, but it starts at 0, so therefore the highest possible number would be 14,999. As you all have done in your programs, in order to compensate for this, you just simply add a +1. Now, that allows us to have a random variable for what we're going to use it for. Let's go ahead and do a for loop. And I know for loops are confusing, and it's mostly because of the syntax that is unfamiliar to us. But once you get used to them, you will see that they're really quite simple and rather useful. So we're going to go ahead and say for. Now remember, the first part is our initialization. And the standard convention is to initialize the integer I and set that equal to 0, semicolon. The next is our condition, or our true or false, our Boolean process. And so here, since we're working with a random number, and what I want to show you is how we can print out all of our random numbers until it reaches a spot. And so here we're going to say I is less than something. Now, in your dice game, you set this equal to your dice number. However, here we want to have a range of numbers. So let's say we want to print 15 lines. And then finally, we want to increment or use the statement. And really, that's just a long way for saying increment, adding one time every time we go through the loop. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do a printout. And what do we want to print? Well, we want to print this right here because we want to look at our numbers. So actually, I'm just going to go ahead and cut that and paste that in its place. So now what's going to happen is, well, let's run it. Sometimes seeing is the best thing. So notice that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In fact, let's go ahead and add this together. Let's go ahead and say int counter is equal to 0. Let's go ahead and put our counter here plus. And we also want to, of course, increment our counter so that it grows each time that it runs. Okay, so save it, run. Now, this is what I want you to look at right here. Let's run this one more time so you put the spacing. So look at it. Notice that our 1 did not change, nor did our number here, our random number. And why is that? Well, let's look at it. Let's take the first part, which is this number. Notice we declared integer counter is equal to 0, and then we're adding to it every time we come down. Well, what happens? Every time it starts, it sets integer to 0, and then it adds 1 to it. So it will always print 1. So the first thing that you have to remember, when you start to see things like this, what's inside the for loop? And it comes here, it drops down to here. It says counter 0, add 1 to counter, print it out, counter 0, add 1. So the first thing we need to do is we need to put this outside the for loop. So now it does not continually reset it to 0. So let's go ahead. All right, so problem fixed there. Notice we go from 1 to 15. Now let's look at the second problem, 311, or what is that? 3137 right here. Why is it printing the same number over and over again? Well, the reason for that is as we go from the program, remember it functions top down. So it's going to start right here. It's going to make a random number. It's going to assign it. Then it's going to come in here and it's going to print that number individually every time. How do we do that? Well, we need this to run every time that the loop does. So let's go ahead and get rid of that, and we want to put that in here. Now when we run it, notice we get a new number every time, and we're counting to 15. So we have, when we set up our program, we had our integers, this one right here, which was our random, as well as our counter, opposite. So they were working against each other. They were doing nothing. So when you run a program and you look at it and you say, my goodness, that doesn't make any sense. If you're inside a for loop, especially a for loop, and it's printing the same thing over and over again, that means your number or whatever you're trying to accomplish is being controlled from something outside of the loop. It needs to come in. Likewise, if it's inside and it's doing the same thing, it needs to be out because you want it to change. And so we have now fixed that issue. I want to show you a couple of other things. So you will see these from time to time, and let's look at the \T character. This is a tab character. Notice here that our number, when it hits 10, kind of gets wonky over here and it steps out, and it's just not very attractive as far as I'm concerned. So let's go ahead and do the /t. Now notice how it tabbed everything over here to make it nice and straight. Of course, we could also do that here. And notice it spaces it out nice. Of course, you could use a +T if you wanted to, and that will just space out twice as far. And when you're looking at a lot of numbers, sometimes it's nice to be able to look at them and see them. Now, let's go ahead and save that and run that so it's nice and clean. All right. And let's go ahead and call this your number is. What else would we want to do with random numbers? We can use random numbers to control all kinds of things. Let's say, for instance, that we want to know if our number, and so what is our number inside our loop, right? Is number is less than or equal to all right, 15,000 is our number range. But let's say that might change. Are you always going to want it to print out 15,000? The answer is probably no. So how do we resolve that? Well, we need to make that a variable. So let's go ahead and call this number range. And we're going to set that equal to nothing for now. And we're going to come over here and we're going to call this number range. And I can't type. So now, when we set this number to a value, let's go ahead and set it to 10. What's going to happen? it's going to change this, and when we run it, now, oh, we got a syntax error. Oh, forgot. I'm going to get rid of that for now. All right, so now, sorry about that, guys. Let's go ahead. We don't want that to be, yeah, that's right. Okay. So now the range is from 1 to 10. And so we can now control the range of numbers. And why does it not like number range? Revert file. Interesting. We were having this problem earlier with one, where we were getting a similar error that it did not like, and it wanted this to be initialized to a number. Okay. So now we have this initialized to something, but also let's look at this number right here. This number tells us how many lines it's going to print out or how many times it's going to loop. That's probably something else we want to control. And so we'll call this loop number. And we'll go ahead and set that to 15 for now. And for number range, we'll set that at 500 for now. So now we should be able to run it. And notice we got 15 printouts, and this is in the range of 0 to actually 1 to 500 because we used our incrementer of our random number. So now let's go ahead and go back to our if statement. So if our number is what? Well, we want it to be half of this number range. So how do we do that? Well, we can say number range divided by 2. That would be the first instinct. And what happens there? Okay, so if this number is even, what's it going to do? And think about what it's going to do if it's odd. But I'm going to let you think on that for a minute. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do a printout. And what do we want to print out? Well, we'll just print out that this number is less than, and then what is our range again? So we can go ahead and say is number range divided by 2. So let's go ahead and run it and see what that does. And we got a print line in here. Let's see. Notice we get this number is less than 250, and our number here, so this is the one it's referring to. So let's go ahead and get rid of this print line. Let's see how that looks. Okay, getting a little better. And so what we want to know is if the number is less than half range, we'll print that out. Else, let's go ahead and print out something else. And we'll just say this number is larger than that. So you notice that we're building a program incrementally. We're getting smaller or larger, but we're taking pieces and adding to it. Each time we're testing it, we're looking to see if it works. If it works, we build onto it. If it doesn't, we've only added one line or maybe two. Fairly easy to figure out what's going wrong. And that's a very important thing. One of the worst things you can do is spend an hour writing code and then test it. And I guarantee you, probably all of you listening have done that. And then you get an error and you're like, what is going on? even when we've only done 1 or 2 lines, sometimes it can cause you to have to think. But at least this way, you can look at it and say, I only did a couple of things, it must be in here. And so this is a very important issue. Test often. Test, test, test. Save your hair and test on. All right, so the question is, what does the loop, the number of times a loop will last? Okay, what does the loop number represent? When you're talking about this number right here, I believe this number is a way for us to control here. We just haven't instituted it yet. And we'll go ahead and do that now. So notice that this is how many times our loop is going to run. Well, rather than have it preset, we're going to go ahead and call it loop number. And so now if we want to change it, it's very easy to change without having to go hunt it down in the code. All we have to do is find loop number and change it, and notice this time it only printed twice. Want to print it again, we can say, well, now I want here 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go ahead and pretty this up just a little bit, just so we can. Now notice the \t is tab, \n is new line. In your formatting chapter, it's either this one or the next one. I believe it's this one. You're going to start looking at these and you'll get used to it. There's only a few of them and they're pretty simple. Okay, so notice we've set it over here. So now we know which line it is associated with. Now, when you're running a program, you don't want the program to have to go into the code and compile it every time, right? So that's where we have our lovely scanner class. So let's go ahead and declare scanner. I call it keyboard, new keyboard, and what goes inside here? System in. Remember, that's what we're doing. We want input. This is going to return, and what do we have to do? Of course, we have to, might help if I call that scanner. And it wants to import the scanner class, so now our keyboard will work. Of course, when you import the keyboard, you usually need to tell people what to do with it, so let's go ahead and say here, and I like to get rid of print line when I'm asking for commands. I just want print, and so we're going to say the first one is, what is the range of random numbers? Then we no longer want to set this at 500. We want to what? Grab it from the keyboard. And what do we want? We want the next integer. Next, we want to ask our user, how many times do you want to loop? And of course, let's get rid of this print line again here. So it just does the print. We no longer need to give it a hard variable. Instead, we want to use input. And of course, it wants to put it there. So now, when we save it and run, what is the range of numbers? Well, I want it to run 12,458. How many times do I want it to loop? I want it to loop 68 times. Notice, loop 68 times, and it proceeds to tell us all of our numbers. So we have built a program, generally useless, but very good programming skills in that we have a random variable, we have a keyboard, we're taking data in, we're using that data to control a for loop as well as an if loop. So I'm going to go ahead and do another if statement in a new program here real quick. But before I do that, are there any more questions on this one? And I'm going to drink some no-name sports drink to hydrate myself. I would say that's a endorsement brand, but it has no name, so I guess not. Okay. I see no questions popping up. All right. So let's do a new one, and we're just going to call this if. We're just going to make a very short if statement. If statements and for loops are so important. And yes, I know, they can get cumbersome because they seem to defy logic oftentimes. So we're just going to make a simple couple of them. Hopefully through redundancy, one moment you're going to do it. And I really hope that you take the time to type these out, watch the video and type these out later, or at least type them similar. You will learn a lot from just doing muscle memory and seeing what's available. Okay, so let's go ahead and set an integer. We're just going to call this our loop here, and we're just going to set it to 4. Now let's write an if statement. So if our loop is what? Well, let's do 3. All right, so if our loop is greater than 6, we want it to do something. Okay, so if it's greater than 6, we're just going to print out, what are we going to print out? Greater than 6. Now, what's the second thing that we want it to do? Well, if it's greater than 6, do this. Else if it is, let's see here. Our loop is what? Well, let's say less than 6. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to print out what? That it is less than 6. And finally, what's our other option? Actually, we have 2 more, so we'll go ahead and do 2 more. We can say else if our loop, no, I can't think of any other ways. We're just going to do it that way. So we're going to say else what? So if our number is not greater than 6 and it is not less than 6, what must it be? 6, right? So we can say else your number is 6. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this and run it real quick. All right, of course it's less than 6 because our number is 4. The difference between else and else if, I'll show you that. So if is clear, that's what starts it. Else if is the second and possibly unlimited number of loops, criteria that you need to evaluate before the last one. Else is always the last one. So if you only have 2, you would have an if and an else. If you have 3 to any number, you're going to have an if, a unknown number of if else, and finally an else. And if you think back about your switch, remember you have the default. Exactly. That's just where I was going. It's the same as it could be considered the same or similar to a default in that it will do everything that's left. So let's look at this real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and change this to a 7. So of course, now what should our program say? It's greater than 6. And finally, let's go ahead and put it to a 6. And what should that say? Your number is 6. We could have written this and said if. Now, if you have an else if, you must have a condition associated with it. You can't just leave it blank. You notice here, if there's else, it's okay. If you put an else if, now it has a problem because now it needs a condition. So we could say loop is equal to 6. And of course, notice it will. And if we run it, 6. Now we could have another if. We could end it with an else statement. But I can't think of a way that we can use it right off the top of my head because we have the number, everything greater than it, and less than it. So we've pretty much wiped out all 3 options. So that's where you can use that in the simplest terms I can think of. you just have to practice them. You just kind of have to get used to thinking, if this, else if that, otherwise this. And so we can do another one. I want to do some string stuff here in a little bit, so I'm not going to go into that on this one right now. But just remember 3 components of an if statement: if, else, if, and else. If has to start, else if requires a condition, and else is always the last one. If you came up here and tried to put in else, it's going to get highly upset really quick. Notice down here it's freaking out, says that it needs to be deleted, and it wants you to create a new if statement. Which brings me to one more thing. You can have a series of if statements. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's do the exact same thing. So if loop is greater than 6, and I'm just going to make my life easier. And so we're going to go ahead and put that in there. It's greater than 6. Then we can come down here and we can say if loop is what, less than 6. And if, because if there's nothing that follows the if, it's the same as like giving a break. It drops out, nothing happens. So if loop is what, exactly equal to 6, what's going to happen? Scroll right down, and equals 6. So let's go ahead and run this real quick. We should get 2 series. All right, so you notice it's equal to 6, so it comes to our first one and says your number is 6. It also then comes down here and says if it's nope, if it's nope, if yep, it equals 6. We can test that, of course. We can do 4 again. Notice less than 6. Let's go ahead and put an exclamation point here just so that we're sure that it's separating the top if statements from the bottom. Okay, so notice that they're both there, and let's go ahead and make this a 9. 94 sounds good, and of course it's greater than all the way across. So that pretty much is a if statement. This is not standard convention. This is. You can do this and get away with it. It does work. But as you begin to build, I think generally it's easier to use this method. Which brings me to the next area, the Google Style Guide. So the Google Style Guide, and all you have to do is type in Google Java Style. This tells you what is the best practice for Java according to Google. And for as far as I'm concerned, that's the boss. If you can make Java happy, everybody else will probably be pretty happy. Notice your special characters. So you have a /B, T, N, F, R, a double, single, and double byte. So these are all your special characters. Go ahead and play around with them. See what they're useful. And you can come down here, and when you're considering, how do I write something? What's it supposed to look like? So here's a catch statement. Notice how it's written. Here's a void statement. Most of your answers of annotation, syntax, and proper syntax can be found on here. So notice this one right here. Private int x semicolon. This is fine. This style is fine. This is permitted, but future edits, which means it's going to cause problems. And the reason for that is this double space. And this one is saying may leave it unaligned. So that this is okay, but I don't see it right off the top of my head. I guess it's unaligned, which looks like identical to that one. But it's good to look at how things are supposed to be. So proper for a switch case statement. Now, this is interesting here because in this particular code, if you have a 1 or a 2, it will do whatever you tell it to after 2 and then break. So you can have something, if 1 and 2 work together, more commonly you would see capital Y, lowercase y, this is a yes, capital N, lowercase n, no. You don't have to print them. If you leave out the break statement, it will run until it gets a break statement. Commenting. This is for constants, how to name a constant. Static, final static, strings, all of these things. So make it a habit to come here when you have questions, and make it a habit to just come here and look around. You notice it's not very long. You can go through it in a few minutes and just kind of look around, and of course they do have an index for search. Okay, any questions on that? All right, well, we are making headway. Programming like programmers. All right, so let's do a new one. And like I said, I'm going to introduce you to a couple of terms or classes that you may not have seen. Don't worry, I want you to gain some exposure, and we just kind of get to see what some coding looks like. All right, so this one is aptly called date and time. Simple enough. So let's get started. All right, so when we do random or scanner, what do? We do the object and we repeat it, right? Same thing here. This pattern is going to become second nature to you. Let's go ahead and import. And which one? I don't want it imported. Notice the first one is a SQL. We want the util. There we go. All right. Now, what do we want to do with it? Well, we want to do what all cool programmers do, and we want to what? Print it out. So notice, let's go ahead and do like we would do with a normal variable. So we'll save this and run it, and you see what we get. Tuesday, March 15th, 1800 hours, 47 minutes, 27 seconds, Mountain Daylight Time of 2016. Could be handy. There's another way to do this, and you could do what's called date dot to string. And let's look at that. Same thing, right? The difference is when you use the to string, you are actually creating a string that can be used in other methods. The date by itself does not. So let's go ahead and say today is, and concatenate that, save it, run it. Today is Tuesday, March 15th. Now you can use some formatting to clean that up, to change it, but for today, I just want to show you that one. Now, we also have a couple of other options. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and do another date. And this one we'll call it date now, which is equal to new date, right? So now we have one called date, which is right here. And now we have a date now. And with our date now, we want to do what's called simple date format. And it went ahead and pulled it in for us. And we'll just call this FT. And that's equal to our new. Now, notice this pattern. We have a new here, we have a new here, we have a new here. We use it all the time. What do you think is going to come next? if you said simple date format, congratulations, you're picking it up. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set a format. Yes, it's actually it's all three. It's an object that gets created by a class that uses a method. So, but you can call it the simple date format method is fine. So we want to set our formatting. So you've probably seen this if you've done any kind of SQL or anything like this. Excel, sometimes you will go in and set your specifics on how you want something to be formatted. All right, so it looks like it's taken FT as well. FT often stands for format, and we'll leave that system. Now let's go ahead and do a printout and look at what we have here. So we can say our current date is. So as compared to our first one, which was today is, oh, you know what I wanted to try? I don't know. Tell me if this is better or not to see it. But today is here. Now we've changed our format. And so that's what we want to look at. We want to see what it looks like. So now we can call our format FT, and we want to format our date now. Format, and we'll put that in our parentheses. Notice it's trying to help us out, date now. And why do we have a complaint? This method is not applicable for date. Yes, it is. Notice right here, what did I forget? Haha, red line gone. There we go. So as you see, programming is debugging. Just get used to it. Don't get stressed out about it. Just get used to it. So now look at how it's changed. So now we have our day, our year, our month in number format, our day of the year at, and now we have time. So this format has changed. Now we could, not that I would understand why anybody would want to do it, but let's say we want seconds, minutes, hours. Notice we have seconds, minutes, and hours. It's kind of confusing right there because that could just about be the time. Had we not had the time change, that would be almost exactly the time. So let's just to make it a little stranger, let's go ahead and do minutes, seconds, hours. Really something bizarre. So now we have our minutes, 53 minutes, 34 seconds, and 6 hours. So you can begin to control what's going on using this simple date format. All right. Any questions on simple date? Okay, so this A stands for, let me think. The A stands for AM, PM, and the Z is for zone. I think zone, zone, zone. Yeah, I think it's for zone, which would be Mountain Daylight Time. I'm pretty sure. We'd have to Google it. Yeah, time zone. And so if we only do one letter of Z and run it, it'll still give us the same response. I could not remember. I've always just done ZZZ, probably because it's an ego thing. But but apparently we just tested it and you do not need it. Let's go ahead and switch this around again just to make sure that we're minutes and seconds. Save it and run it. Yeah, so you only need one Z in there. If you do a search for simple date format codes, you'll get all of them. Seconds. So big. So we could go ahead and put big in there, which is milliseconds. So now we have the milliseconds in there as well. You can do hours. You can do minutes of the hour, days of the week, the actual day, AM, PM, military time. There's all kinds of options. And the E at the beginning stands for day of the week, which figure that one out, I have no clue. But this E right here corresponds to Tuesday. And then, of course, we have our year, so we could change it to what we use, which is typically either month, day, year. So let's go ahead and do month. Little m is minutes, by the way. Day, and then let's just do a 2-digit year. So notice now we have Tuesday, 3/15/16. Yeah, the E. The E is pretty weird. Let me see here. Like I said, you'll want to Google. I'll put it in the box, date, format codes. And that will give you the whole series. We could put a G in there, like right here. That will tell us Anno Domini right there, which is after death, or 2016 AD. Those are the main ones, but there's about 15 of them that you can use. Okay, any other questions on that one? Okay, I want to go ahead and do at least one more real quick. And we're going to do string compare. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a string real quick, because we haven't worked with strings a whole lot. And we just want to call this string is equal to, we'll do the traditional hello world. Oh, hello, Michelle. Oh, yeah. I forgot. I didn't realize until yesterday afternoon that we had a time change. So, and I live here, so no worries there. We're just going over some of the past and the past couple of weeks, and looking at some new code that you may not have seen. We're looking at date. I forgot what the last one we just did. Oh, we've simple format. Now we're going to do a string compare real quick. Okay, so now let's have we'll set up another string, and we'll call this string 2. And what we do here is we want lowercase. Now all we're going to be doing is comparing strings. And we can compare strings the same way that we compare anything else. Are they the same? Visually, let's look at this. Is string 1 equal to string 2? Right there. Right? No, they're not. Now, one more thing that we have not come across, and you will see it, so I'm going to show it to you, but you don't have to worry about it too much. But if you see it, don't freak out. And it's called object. And we're going to go ahead and create an object string, and we're going to set that equal to string. So this object string is the same as this string that we just declared over here. Like I said, don't worry about this one. I just wanted you to see it. So you don't freak out should you see it down the road. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to compare. So we want to compare string. Notice in Eclipse, remember it's going to pop up, and we want to compare to string, right there. And what do we want to compare it to? Well, we want to compare it to string number 2. So let's go ahead and save this real quick and run it. And we get a negative number, negative 32. Now, I'm going to tell you that I'm not really sure why negative 32 is the number. However, is a negative number, and it might be the number of variables. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Nope, I'm not sure why it's negative 32. However, when you see a negative number, the answer is false. It is false. And so what it's telling us is that it is false. They are not the same. Now, Java has a massive amount of really cool string operators. When we start looking at our final project, you're going to use them quite a bit, but they are really nice. They take a lot of the hard work out of programming. As you can see, we compared these two together quite simply. And otherwise, we would have to write a for loop, and then we'd have to put it into an array, and we'd have to compare one array to the other. Simplified here. So let's look at another one real quick. And this time, let's go ahead and what would make these two the same? String 1 the same as string 2. Well, if we, let's compare it to ignoring case. And what does case mean? That means uppercase, lowercase, right? And to string 2. So now we're saying string 1, we're going to compare that ignoring the case to string 2. Take a second. Are they going to come out as the same? Let's save it and run it. Notice we get a 0. Again, I'm not sure why we get a 0. However, it means true. So a negative number is false, 0 is true. And normally when you're using these, you will not be printing out the number. You will be using them to control an if statement or something like that, which we'll work on in the future. But just know a negative number, false, 0 is true. And now we have one more that I want you to compare. And again, I want you to think about this. So we have this object string here, and we said that it's equal to string here. So when we compare this to this, what should we get? And hopefully, string compare, again, we want to, oops, no, that's right, compare to, and we want to compare it to what? String 2. Now, it's throwing a fit, and it wants to cast. And casting means it wants to change one from the other. And so this is a real important part right here. Notice, we wanted this to be string 1 anyway. Okay, notice that it does not allow you to compare the object to the string. However, we can compare the string to the object. And when we do this, we have one more little part that we have to, and it's called object string. Remember, that's the name of our variable. And we want to convert that to a string because that's what we're working with. This is a string. An object is a thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a string. And so we have to turn it into a string so that we can compare it. Now, when we compare the two, notice we get a 0 again, which means what? Yes, they're the same thing. I know this is weird right here, don't worry about that too much. Because in the future, you'll be using it to control things based on true or false. So that's one of the interesting things. There are several of them that are really neat. There's reverse, a string, there's dozens and dozens of them. And as you can see, of course, when we're right here, let's do this just so you can take a look at it. We have all of these options with which to compare a string. One other one that's rather cool. Let's go ahead and get that one in there real quick. We want that compared to. We don't need to compare it to another string because we already have that one in there. Okay, one more that's kind of neat. So let's go ahead and say system out. Now, what if we wanted to make all of this uppercase, for instance? So we can do string to here, come down your list, and if you look, you'll say to uppercase. We'll run that. And notice we get hello world in all caps. If we do the same thing again, but this time we say string to, and now we go to, so I want you to be able to see it, to lowercase. We have that as well. And so what will happen now? It will make it the whole thing lowercase. Where that is beneficial is, say you want someone to type in their username and email, and you don't want to have to try to compensate for uppercase and lowercase. You can just let them put whatever they want, and you convert it all to lowercase, and that's how you store it. Are there any other questions? Well, I do not see any. This chapter 7, let's go over it real quick here. Let's look at a couple things. So it's thinking in terms of classes and objects. I want you to read this. Next week, we're actually going to go over this and part of what's on 8. So I want you to read it, and you will have questions. I'll try to record a video later on this week that goes over it. But what we're doing now is we're beginning to separate our code to make it more useful and to allow others to be able to write a particular piece of code, and you can merge them together, if you will. And in fact, that's what you'll be doing on your final project. It will be a team project that will require all of you to write some code, but you'll have to put it together to make the thing work. So also, starting tomorrow, I'm going to record a video that will tell you about the extra credit, and that will be through getting a ranked on HackerRank. Watch for that. You'll be doing Java assignments. As you get ranked, you can earn some extra credit. This is important to build your resume, also to show you what's happening in the world of programming, just to kind of give you a more familiar set, as well as to start to engage in the community. It's very important. Programming is not a solo sport. We all joke about the dark basement and hacking in the dark, but it's not a solo game. Really good code requires hundreds or sometimes thousands, look at Google, of engineers and programmers. And so you have to get used to working with others and to make your code as clean and efficient. That's why commenting is so important. That's why I require you to comment or you lose grade points, because you have to be able to work with others. We're also going to be setting up a GitHub account, which is also good for your resume, but it is the industry standard on for software programmers, and so I want you to at least have some familiarity with it. So go ahead and read over Chapter 7. Shoot me an email if you have any questions. Do not hesitate, and If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'll give it just a minute to see. All right. Doesn't look like there's anything. Get caught up. If you're having questions, call me, email me, wave me down if you're in the lab. Michelle, shoot me an email anytime. Also, you can use Zoom. I'm going to be recording a video on that, and I'll post that on how you can use the same software to get a hold of me if you have questions where you can screen share, because we are getting at a point where it does become more complicated. And sometimes the simplest little error can cause a lot of frustration. I do not want you to waste time on frustrations. If you get stuck, shoot me a message. So tomorrow there should be a couple of things up. Please take the time to get signed up, and that's for everybody, not just you, Michelle, but let's continue to do this. You guys are doing really good. I'm really proud of you. And I promise you have learned more right now than I did in my first Java class from start to finish. I still couldn't put an if statement together, much less do anything with it. So it is tough, but you're doing excellent, everybody. And until next time, keep coding. Take care.